Good morning, everybody. It's Marty, the JavaScript party. Rhett's out in the living room. I don't know, just kind of tired. We went to a party last night, so I'm kind of tired. NFL draft party. So that was fun. I got to hang out with a bunch of young people, and it was really neat. And it was just a wonderful time. But anyways, so we are ex- I'm trying to build this application, right? And the idea is that, you'll be able to create like these visualizations and be able to manipulate them and all that. And this would be like sort of your prototypical project that I thought in a year I would have something nice. And now we are a year and almost 5 months in, and we're still at, just foundational pieces. And right now we're from 30,000 feet, we're working on deleting. And what I found out was, and sort of has been a major rabbit hole, is that I just leaving massive memory leaks. And by massive, I don't mean like the pieces of memory are huge. What I mean is there's lots and lots, tons and tons of them. And then the more I've sort of dug in, the more I realized how much more work I have to do re to get it working. And as we've sort of narrowed down and got lower and lower and lower and aimed deeper and deeper and deeper into this mess, like I've started to run into like traditional problems that I've had in the past, but that I didn't really understand. I just sort of like started poking around and changing stuff, and then everything started working, and it was just like, okay, don't touch it. I don't know what I did to make that work, but don't touch that. Um, but we have found that one of the things is that we have is that we have run into how to consistently replicate the NG0200 circular dependencies. That was one of those things that I just had never really known how to do. And one of the workarounds that we've kind of come up with is this get st mesh service, or this deferred class that will then get a mesh from the injector, or get a service from the injector, which then avoids the idea of two services depending on each other for creation. So this service doesn't have to exist already before the animation service can exist. So now I have my mesh service, and um, and there's other things that we're going, like I'm playing around with this idea of using emoticons in my code to uh, to comment things. So this is a deferred. So clock, I think, is what I'm trying to get set up. Is that anytime anything's deferred, I'll put a little clock next to it, and then anytime I have dependencies, I'll put a little syringe next to it, because it's like dependency injection. It's injecting it. This is an injection behavior. So I'm injecting this dependency in, but only at the function level, not at the class level, not at the construction time, but at runtime, when the function is at execution time, I guess would be at function execution time might be the best way to put that. So that's where we're at on that. So now I have this mesh service, and then I can get my mesh by the ID. I don't know why I would do that. Get animation for stmesh ID. And this isn't okay. So this was sort of something that broke after I started working on it. This isn't part of what I'm working on, because all this thing does is it gets the animations for an ST mesh ID. So it must be working. I'm guessing it's working because it probably gets called in order to do this. This is probably how the code that runs in the animation request animation frame. This is probably how it gets its stuff. So so that's good. All right. So what am I doing now though? So now this is working. And so what I was trying to do, I believe, was delete an animation. And animations are going to be the most complex one. It looks like I haven't even gotten started. Are going to be one of the most complex ones, because um, it an animation, the intention is for them animations to exist anywhere in any aspect, and anywhere is kind of hard to describe, except for that I have actually created a visualization tool for myself. And let's see, there we go. So when I say anywhere, I mean in any one of these seven or six things, right? So the render could be animated in some way, like maybe the width and height of it is changing. Maybe it goes from one camera to another. Maybe it goes from one scene to another, something like that. The camera can definitely be animated. What it's looking at, where it's located, um, what is even like we could even have some sort of effect where we slowly increase how far we can see or something like that. So that ST bar can be animated. Just all kinds of stuff, can be animated in camera. In scene, we definitely could animate. I don't know. I believe scene does have other attributes that could be animated. I don't think. I guess the mesh ID array could be animated. Like we go from one mesh to another or something. I don't know. This one's maybe I need to rethink these arrays. Don't know. They're going to be difficult to animate. But the mesh itself can be animated. As you can see, there's all kinds of stuff. So when I say like anything can be animated, that's what I mean. But we do not actually have a way to delete something. And I never really thought about that. But if you have an add and a create, if you don't have a delete, that's definitely a code smell, right? That obviously something isn't done properly. So let's say, and I think the way I've been doing it is I say like delete st animation for mesh ID, for mesh ID. And basically it's going to take an animation ID. I believe are they called ST animation IDs? Yeah, an ST animation ID. And that is a number. I find that to be very helpful. Like actually being able, if you can get to the point where you can just type out what the uh, strong typing is for as you're working, that really does sort of make the whole experience feel a lot better. But so and then we're also going to have a ST mesh ID, and that's a number. Now, the general idea is that we're sort of Boolean, um, that we're sort of circling on is the idea that like if you're deleting something for something, then you can't consider that something that you're deleting it for a reason to keep the the item. So the general idea is that we're going to say, hey, delete this for a given mesh ID, but like let's say a geometry happens to be using the exact same animation, we're not going to want to delete it. So if we find any geometries at all that a have that animation ID, we shouldn't delete the animation ID. But if we find a mesh, if we find one ID and it happens to be the ID that we're deleting for, if there's even a single one of them, if there's that one, but it's the one that we're deleting for, then we can ignore that. But if there's another one, then we can't. And that's just sort of like that wasn't the plan from the beginning. That wasn't architected into this. That was just sort of um, like stumbled upon. So all right, so it's 8:54, so I have a couple of minutes left. Um, all right, so now we have this delete at animations for mesh ID. So we need to kind of circle back to our mesh and kind of get into that, our mesh service. So over here, we're deleting our meshes. See, we're deleting a mesh for a scene ID. Meshes can only exist in that, and then we have this delete mesh, right? So here we delete our geometry, and now here's where we want to delete our animation. Now, one of the things is that is like you kind of have to keep in mind, and I've never really thought this way before, and I have to admit, I'm starting to realize that I actually struggle with thinking in abstractions. So I need to get a little bit better at that. Like the way I've sort of developed my coding scheme has worked really, really well, but I do think that um, growing in such a way that I kind of get more in alignment with a lot of other developers will be very helpful to me. Sometimes that's not helpful, sometimes it's the opposite of helpful, but so anyways, in this abstraction, anything that lives above the hierarchy, so when we add this, when I say above the hierarchy, um, this st render sits at the top because it has a camera ID and a scene ID, right? So that's at the very top of the whole architecture. So I was going to say that the st render ID lives at the top because it has. No, that is not why it's at the top. It's at the top because it doesn't go inside of anything else. And I'm actually not sure about that now that I think about it, because if I go here and then let me go back. So does this, yeah, so actually this ST visualization is at the top. So anyways, the whole general idea is, and honestly, like we could have argued about that all day long, but now we have this visualization so we can easily just see it. Um, but and this ST viz component ID seems like that should be, oh, no, because it's gone. So we still have this component, stviz component, even though it doesn't even exist anymore. So that's probably weird, right? The stviz component actually maps to an actual component in Angular. Um, so and this component doesn't actually exist anymore. So this is already technically a um, what do I try to say? This is technically a memory leak. So I'm curious if I go here and then I go back again. Okay, so we still only have the one component and the ID. So maybe inside of that code, I'm actually seeing if I already have a component for this one. But see, the component ID is -1. So this is an orphaned thing. So I don't know. It's going to take me a while to sort of process that, whether we should that be gone as soon as on delete. It probably should be inside of the lifecycle hook for the component. We probably should delete this um, visualization. So, but I'm not going to even notify it because I actually want to go through the whole process of thinking through this again. But anyway, so ST animation service. So since the animation service is below the material, the mesh, since it's a child of the mesh, since it's an attribute of the mesh, um, then I have made the decision to, I will inject anything that is, so animations can inject mesh, but mesh can't inject, no, it's the other way, right? Mesh can inject animation, it can inject its children, but but it cannot inject its adults, its its parents. So that's that. So dot delete. And I don't even know if that was a good idea or not. So delete animation for mesh ID. So we do have the mesh ID. So mesh ID, and then we do have the animation ID, right? Do we have the animation ID? Oh, it looks like I kind of did it the other way around. For the most part, I took the ID and then the mesh ID was second. So let's go ahead and take care of that real quick. So I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to go back to my animation service. And then I'm going to swap. Oh, no. So it was supposed to be animation ID first. So I actually did that right. So I'm going to hit back to get over here. Okay, I do not have my and I guess that should be animations. So I don't have that, and that's because I need to iterate over the animations for the mesh. So I have the mesh, right? So it'd probably be easier to work with it as it. See here, I'm kind of working with it directly. I think that's a good idea, but const mesh st mesh equals. But I think it is, and then that is of type st mesh. And that's like kind of just a reality check right there. Like it's just like, okay, the transpiler, if I've gotten some sort of weird idea, and then I'm just going to use it this way. This is clearly, um, you know, what's the argument? Like, oh, do we want six or do we want a half a dozen? Like they're kind of the same thing, but I think that it's one less cognitive step that you have to go through to make that work. Okay, so now we want to iterate over all of the st mesh dot animation IDs dot for each. So we're basically want to iterate over each one of those, and we want to tell it to do something. And so right now we're giving it an anonymous function, which clearly we're going to want to separate out into its own standalone function, so that for ease of unit testing. So, and I will say that every project I've ever worked on that made heavy use of unit testing ended up being massively delayed. And this is another example of that. But I have really enjoyed doing unit testing at the same time. So it's sort of like it was good for me, but not necessarily good for the project, I think. But it was very, very good for me. Anyways, happy coding, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Happy Friday. Bye.